subscribe.
Mark had reached the point where the bots were starting to feel more human than the real people. Every mainstream dating app on his phone had become the same stale ritual. Match with a girl whose photos looked just a little too polished. Get 3 messages in before she tried to sell him crypto, an OnlyFans, or a line about investment opportunities that always read like it had been translated twice and approved by a scammer in a hurry. Even the genuine women seemed exhausted, guarded, or so swarmed with options that a regular guy barely registered as a blip. After 6 months of swiping, ghosting, and reporting obvious fakes, Mark was beginning to think loneliness might actually be safer. That was how he ended up on Christian Mingle. He wasn't exactly devout. He went to church on Christmas when his mother insisted, knew enough hymns to fake his way through the choruses, and had a vague, culturally inherited belief in God that mostly flared up during turbulence or hospital waiting rooms. Still, he figured he qualified as Christian in the same broad American sense as everyone who said grace at Thanksgiving and checked a box when it was convenient. It wasn't like he was infiltrating a monastery. He made a profile, picked the least embarrassing photos he had, and expected more of the same. Instead, 2 days later, a woman named Ashley messaged him first. Her profile picture showed a pale, pretty blonde with serious blue eyes, and a smile that looked shy instead of posed. Her messages were warm, direct, and startlingly free of red flags. No strange grammar, no immediate requests for money, no vague references to business opportunities. She asked him about his work, laughed at his jokes, and, most dangerously of all, seemed genuinely interested. By the 3rd day, they were talking steadily. Ashley said she wasn't on the app much, that she hated cities, hated crowds, hated how fake people were now. She said she lived a little out of the way with her family. When Mark suggested they meet for coffee somewhere public, she sent back, "I'd rather not go into town, too many eyes, too much ugliness. But you can come here if you want. We can have dinner. My family's old-fashioned, but they'll be kind." It should have sounded weird. It did, a little, but not enough. Pretty women didn't usually come this easy to Mark. When they did, he had learned to mistrust it. Yet, Ashley didn't feel like a scam. She felt earnest, sheltered maybe, a little strange, but real. And he was so starved for something real that his caution began dressing itself up as cynicism. Maybe, he told himself, he'd gotten so used to fraud that sincerity now looked suspicious. So on Saturday evening, he put on a clean button-down, drove out of town, and followed the directions Ashley texted him. The paved roads turned to county roads. The county roads narrowed to cracked lanes lined with leaning pines. Then even those disappeared, and the GPS lost its shape, the map spinning in a useless gray patch, while Ashley's messages became his only guide. Take the old logging road by the rusted tractor. Keep left at the creek bed. If you pass the white cross nailed to the tree, you've gone too far. The woods deepened around him, until they seemed less like a place and more like a wall. The headlights caught tree trunks, packed close together like black ribs. Branches scraped the sides of his car with fingernails on metal sounds that made him wince. The logging road was little more than 2 muddy tracks. Once or twice, he nearly turned around, but each time his phone lit up with another message from Ashley. Almost here. Can't wait to see you. By the time he saw the first cabin, his signal had dropped to 1 bar. The place looked less like a home than a settlement forgotten by time. 8 weathered wooden cabins stood in a ragged clearing, their roofs sagging, their windows glowing dim amber, through curtains yellowed with age. There were no visible power lines, no cars except a rusted pickup, with weeds growing around the tires, no sounds besides the engine ticking, wind in the pines, and something metallic clanging somewhere deeper in the dark. Mark stopped the car and stared. He sent Ashley a message. "Here, this the place?" It took long enough to make him think the message hadn't gone through. Then a cabin door creaked open, and Ashley stepped out into the porch light. She was prettier in person, taller than he expected, in a plain cream dress that fell to her ankles. Her hair hung loose over her shoulders, and she smiled when she saw him. But something about the smile was wrong. Not fake, exactly. Just incomplete, as if only her mouth had remembered to do it. She raised a hand and beckoned him inside. Mark climbed out, pocketed his keys, and followed her. The air smelled of wet wood, chimney smoke, and something sour underneath. Like meat left too long in a sink, up close. Ashley said almost nothing, just, "I'm so glad you came," in a voice softer than it had been in messages. Inside, the cabin was hotter than it should have been, with a wood stove belching dry heat into the room. A table had already been set for dinner. 5 people sat waiting. Ashley took one chair. Mark hesitated, then sat where they seemed to expect him to. To Ashley's left sat her mother, a severe woman with a face like carved wax and a long braid gone gray. Beside her sat Ashley's sister, younger by a few years, expressionless, her eyes fixed on Mark with unnerving intensity. Across from him sat Ashley's father, broad-shouldered and heavy, with hands like split logs and a short beard flecked white. At the head of the table sat an old man they all called Gramps. Gramps looked ancient in a way that seemed to have hardened rather than softened him. His skin was like dry paper stretched over bones. He wore a black suit coat despite the heat, and his eyes were clear, bright, and hateful. No one offered food. No one introduced themselves. They just stared. Mark tried a smile. "Nice to meet everybody." No one answered. Then Gramps leaned forward and placed both hands flat on the table. "I told you," he said, his voice thin but cutting. The outside world was lustful and evil. The room remained perfectly still. Gramps turned his eyes on Ashley without actually looking away from Mark. "I warned you what kind of men dwell beyond the trees." Mark gave a nervous laugh. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Ashley invited me." Gramps slammed one hand down so hard the dishes rattled. "This demon," he hissed, pointing a crooked finger at Mark, "came to defile our sweet Ashley as if he was entitled to her body." For a second, Mark just sat there, not understanding the sentence. It floated in the air like something translated from another century. Then he saw the faces around the table. Ashley was no longer smiling. Her mother looked disgusted. Her sister looked excited. The father's jaw flexed as if he were holding back a grin. Even Ashley, who had brought him here, stared down at the table with a strange, dutiful blankness, as though she had performed her role and now awaited instructions. Fear arrived all at once, cold and absolute. "Okay," Mark said, standing slowly. "I'm gonna go." No one moved. Then the front door behind him burst open. A huge man stepped in, ducking beneath the frame. Mark hadn't seen him outside. He looked like he'd been assembled out of fence posts. Bald head, thick neck, denim overalls stretched across a barrel chest. He blocked the doorway entirely. At the same instant, Ashley's father lunged across the table with a roar. knocking plates and cups into the air. Mark stumbled backward. The father's hand caught his shirt and tore buttons loose. The big man behind him reached for his shoulders, and then instinct, stupid and graceless, saved him. It might have sounded ridiculous to anybody else, but after getting mugged at a gas station 2 years earlier, Mark had started carrying mace in his pocket. He'd never used it. Half the time he forgot it was there. But now his fingers closed around the canister like it had been waiting for this moment. He spun and sprayed the big man full in the face. The effect was immediate. The man bellowed and clawed at his eyes, staggering into the doorframe. Mark turned and blasted Ashley's father just as he came again. The father screamed, hands flying to his face, toppling backward over the table and taking dishes, chairs, and Gramps with him. The cabin exploded into noise. Ashley shrieked. Her mother shouted scripture. Gramps was cursing him in a voice suddenly powerful and animal, not old at all. Mark shoved past Ashley, hard enough to send her spinning, ducked around the splintered table, and ran out into the dark. His car was gone. For one frozen heartbeat, he stood in the clearing, unable to process what he was seeing. The place where he had parked was empty, except for fresh tracks in the mud, already filling with black water. Then a light appeared in one cabin window. Another. A door slammed. Men's voices carried through the trees. Mark ran. He tore into the woods without direction, branches whipping his face, roots snagging his shoes. Several times he fell and tasted dirt and pine needles. Once he heard someone behind him, crashing through the underbrush, close enough that he almost cried out. But the forest was thick, uneven, and moonless, and terror gave him the kind of endurance no Jim ever had. He kept moving until the shouts faded, and all he could hear was his own ragged breathing. Hours passed in fragments. He crossed a creek, chest deep in freezing water, because he'd heard somewhere that dogs lose scent there. He hid beneath an uprooted tree, while distant lantern lights drifted among the trunks like wandering stars. He found wooden crosses nailed to trees, small and crude, each wrapped in strips of stained cloth that fluttered in the wind. Once he came upon a clearing full of stumps and thought he saw figures standing among them, heads bowed in prayer. But when lightning flashed, there was nothing there. Near dawn, filthy, shaking, and half out of his mind, he stumbled back onto the logging road. He followed it until he found enough signal to call 911. The police took him seriously, only after they found the remains of his car. It had been dragged to a bend in the road and burned so thoroughly that the frame looked like the skeleton of some huge animal, left to blacken in the rain. There were no fingerprints, no useful tire tracks. The cabins, when officers finally reached them with warrants and backup, were empty. Fresh ash in the stoves. Beds still warm, one deputy said, but no people, no records. Nothing but Bibles, canned food, hand tools, and a painted wooden sign nailed inside the largest cabin. The Family of Christ the Sacred Heart. A detective interviewed Mark twice. The second time, after the formal questions were done, he closed the file and sat back with a weary expression Mark would never forget. There's been talk about them for years, he said. Off-grid religious group. Started as a breakaway church, then drifted into something else. They move around, keep children isolated, recruit women online sometimes. Men too, if they think they can make an example of them. We watch. A few federal agencies watch. But every time somebody pushes, it becomes a minefield of political red tape and jurisdictional nonsense. He looked at Mark for a long moment. My advice? Best to avoid them. Mark deleted Christian Mingle before he got home. He deleted every photo Ashley had sent, though one refused to leave his mind. Her standing in the porch light, smiling with only her mouth, as if the rest of her already belonged to something deeper in the woods. A week later, he reinstalled Tinder. The bots were still there. The scammers were still there. A girl named Jessica tried to lure him into a crypto scheme before he'd even said hello. Another match sent him a suspicious link with 3 winking emojis and a Cash App request. Mark reported them, unmatched, and sat staring at the glow of his phone in the dark. For the first time in his life, the fakes comforted him. Because fake people wanted money. Fake people wanted attention. Fake people wanted clicks. And somewhere beyond the edge of town, beyond the roads that still appeared on maps, there were real people who wanted something much worse.
I used to think I was good at reading people. That was before Matt. For a long time, I didn't date at all. After everything with Jamie, my high school sweetheart, my only boyfriend, I just shut down. We'd been together for 6 years. 6. And in the end, I found out he'd been with other girls the entire time. Not just 1 or 2. A rotation. Like I was the constant, and they were just background noise. It took me years to stop feeling stupid. Years to stop replaying every memory, trying to spot the signs I'd missed. Years to stop asking myself how someone could look you in the eye every day and lie without flinching. So I stayed single, safe, predictable, lonely, but in a controlled way. Eventually, though, even that started to feel like its own kind of prison. Everyone around me was moving forward, dating, getting engaged, building lives. I was stuck in place, clinging to a past that had already humiliated me enough. So I downloaded the app. At first it felt ridiculous, swiping left and right like people were products. But then I matched with Matt. His profile was normal, disarmingly so. Pictures of him hiking, one with a dog, his sister's apparently, one slightly goofy mirror selfie. His bio made me laugh, not try hard funny, just easy. We started talking, then texting, then calling. He was charming, in that effortless way that doesn't feel rehearsed. He teased me just enough, listened when I talked, remembered small things. There was a hint of something else, though, like a frat boy energy that peeked through sometimes. Not enough to put me off, just enough to make him feel human, real. Our first date was coffee that turned into dinner. Our second was drinks and a late walk through the city, the kind where everything feels cinematic and a little unreal. By the third, I was invested. That night we went to a bar with dim lighting and music that made conversation feel private, even in a crowd. We laughed a lot, drank a little too much, and when he walked me home, standing outside my building under a flickering street lamp, something shifted. We kissed. It wasn't hesitant or awkward. It was the kind of kiss that feels like it's been building for weeks. His hand slid to my waist, mine to his chest. It got a little more intense than I expected. Hands wandering, bodies pressing closer, but it still felt exciting, wanted. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless and smiling. "So," he said, voice low, "4th date?" I laughed. "Oh, you're confident." "I'm right." I hesitated for a second when he suggested his place. Not a bad hesitation, just awareness, a flicker of that old caution. But I pushed it down. "Okay," I said. His building was nicer than I expected. One of those modern apartment complexes downtown, with glass doors, a concierge desk, polished floors that reflected the ceiling lights. It smelled faintly like expensive cleaning products and something floral. I stood outside for a moment before buzzing his flat. Smoothing down my dress like that would somehow calm my nerves. Good nervous, I told myself. The door clicked open and I stepped inside. His apartment was on the 8th floor. When he opened the door, he was smiling the same way he always did. Warm, familiar. "Hey," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Hey." The place was impressive, clean, minimalist, with a view of the city lights that stretched endlessly beyond the windows. We had drinks, talked, laughed. For a while, everything felt exactly like it had on our other dates. Easy, comfortable, safe. That's why what happened next felt so wrong. The buzzer went. Matt's head snapped slightly toward the door. Just for a second. But I noticed. "You expecting someone?" I asked. Probably just a delivery or something," he said quickly, already moving toward the intercom. He pressed the button without asking who it was. "Yeah," he said, a pause. Then, "Come up." Something cold slid into my stomach. "Friends?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just for a sec," he said. "They won't stay long." Before I could respond, there was a knock. Matt opened the door. 4 men walked in. They weren't loud or rowdy like I expected. They were quiet, observing. Each of them scanned the room and then me. My chest tightened. "Hey," one of them said casually, though his eyes didn't match the tone. "Sorry, we just dropped by." I forced a smile. "Oh, hi." "We just need Matt for like 10 minutes, another said, "if that's cool." "Yeah, of course," I said automatically, even though it wasn't. Then one of them, tall, broad, with a stare that felt like it pinned me in place, tilted his head slightly. "Geez, Matty," he said, grinning slowly. "She a nice little piece of cake." The words hit me like a slap. My skin prickled. Matt laughed. "All right, chill." But he didn't sound annoyed, just dismissive. They all moved toward the kitchen. And something inside me, something deep and instinctive, screamed, "Don't ignore this. Don't be polite. Don't stay." I stood there for a second, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Then I moved. Quietly, carefully, I stepped closer to the kitchen. Just enough to hear. Their voices dropped, but not enough. "Told you she'd come," one said. Matt's voice followed. "It's fine. She doesn't suspect a thing, boys. I've got her totally invested in this." The words hollowed me out. Another voice. "Good. Let's not waste time." A third. "Did you get everything ready?" "Yeah," Matt said. "Bathroom's clear. Bedroom too." My vision blurred. I didn't think. I didn't question. I just ran. The bathroom door slammed behind me, and I locked it with shaking hands. For a second, I just stood there, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly the same. But everything was different. My hands fumbled for my phone. I called Emma. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey." "Emma," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Something's wrong." Silence. Then, "What happened?" I told her. Not everything. Just enough. "Call the police," she said immediately. "Right now, don't come out of that bathroom." "I feel stupid," I said, tears spilling over. "What if I'm wrong?" "You're not wrong," she snapped. "Call them." So I did. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Police," the operator said. My voice cracked. I think I'm in danger. I gave them the address, tried to explain. My words came out jumbled, panicked. They said they were on their way. A knock sounded on the door. "Hey," Matt's voice came, light, almost amused. "You okay in there?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. I feel a bit sick." A pause. "You need anything?" "No, just, give me a minute." Another pause, longer this time. "All right," he said, finally. His footsteps retreated. I slid down against the door, clutching my phone, listening. The apartment was too quiet. Minutes stretched, then voices again, louder this time, edgy. How long's she going to be in there? She said she's sick. Yeah? Or she heard something? A sharp edge entered Matt's voice. She didn't hear anything. You sure? Silence. Then, I'll get her out. My breath stopped. Footsteps approached, a harder knock this time. Hey, Matt said, you've been in there a while. I'm okay, I said, my voice barely holding. You sure? He asked. We're getting a bit worried. Another voice, closer now. Maybe we should check on her. My entire body went rigid. Then a loud knock at the front door. Voices, new ones. Police. The shift in the apartment was immediate. Footsteps, sudden movement, a curse. The bathroom door handle rattled. Stay in there, Matt said sharply. No warmth now, no charm. I didn't move. More voices flooded the apartment, authoritative, controlled. The bathroom door opened a few minutes later. A police officer stood there. You okay? He asked. I nodded, though I didn't feel okay at all. They escorted me out. All 5 of them were standing in the living room. Matt's eyes locked onto mine. Gone was the charm. Gone was the warmth. There was something else there now. Something cold. Something furious. The others stared too. Not confused, not embarrassed, angry. Like I'd ruined something. The police searched the apartment. I didn't see everything they found, but I heard enough. Restraints, a camera, a camcorder, drugs. One of the officers said the name quietly, but it still echoed in my head. GHB, the date drug. My stomach turned. I don't remember leaving the building. I just remember the air outside hitting my face and realising I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I still think about it, not just what they planned to do, but how normal he was, how easy it had been to trust him. 3 dates, 3 perfect, ordinary, believable dates. If the buzzer hadn't gone, if I hadn't listened, if I'd stayed polite. I don't let myself finish that thought, because the worst part isn't just how close I came. It's that I still don't know how to see the difference. And that means they're still out there, smiling, waiting, just like Matt did.
I wouldn't call myself a ladies' man. Not even close. I've just never really struggled. That's the honest truth. I'm not the best-looking guy in the room, but I'm not the worst either. I can hold a conversation, make people laugh, and that's usually enough. So when I matched with her, I remember thinking there had to be some kind of mistake. Her name was Chloe, blonde, perfect skin, the kind of smile that looks like it belongs in an advert, the kind of girl you assume is either fake, a bot, or way out of your league. I almost swiped past her, convinced it wasn't real, but we matched within minutes. And then she messaged first. That should have been my first warning. At the time, though, it just felt like I'd gotten lucky. We talked for maybe 20 minutes on the app before she asked if I had WhatsApp. That wasn't unusual. Most people prefer it. But the speed of it felt intense. Still, I didn't question it. I gave her my number. Almost immediately, things changed. The messages got forward. Not explicit at first, just heavily suggestive. Compliments that felt too direct, too eager. Then came the photos. Not fully nude, but close enough. Poses that left very little to the imagination. Angles that were deliberate, calculated. I remember staring at my phone, feeling that rush of adrenaline and disbelief. Looking back, it's obvious. It was a red flag the size of a flare gun. But at the time, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was flattered, excited, curious, and, if I'm being honest, completely blinded by it. She kept pushing to meet, that same night, if possible. Said she didn't like wasting time. Said she wanted to see if there was chemistry. I agreed. Of course I did. The only odd thing was where she wanted me to pick her up. Not her house, not a street corner, a McDonald's car park on the edge of town. I asked why, joking that it sounded like a drug deal. She replied with a laughing emoji and said she didn't want her nosy neighbors seeing her leave with someone. Again, I ignored the feeling in my gut. I drove there just after 9. The car park was mostly empty. A few scattered cars, the glow from the drive-thru casting everything in that harsh yellow light. I remember checking my phone, making sure I had the right place. Then I saw her, leaning against a low wall near the edge of the lot. She looked exactly like her pictures. Exactly. If anything, even better in person. But when she got in the car, there was something else about her. She seemed a little rough around the edges. The way she spoke and held herself was brash and streetwise. She came across like a character from the TV show Shameless, with that loud, unapologetic confidence. "Hey," she said, sliding in like she'd done it 100 times. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound casual, and not like my brain had completely short-circuited. For a minute or two, it felt normal. We talked, made small conversation. I suggested we grab food, maybe go bowling, do something low pressure. She barely reacted. Instead, she turned toward me, shifting in her seat. There was a sudden intensity in her expression that hadn't been there before. "Or," she said quietly, leaning closer, "we could just go somewhere private." The way she said it, it wasn't playful. It wasn't shy. It was direct, certain. My pulse spiked. Every sensible thought I might have had just dissolved. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, okay." She gave me directions. Not to a house, not to anywhere I recognized. Just vague turns, back roads, less streetlights, fewer cars. Eventually, we ended up in a lay-by on the edge of town. The kind of place people stop during the day to take phone calls or eat lunch. At night, though, it was completely dark. No passing traffic. Just trees on one side and an open field on the other. I hesitated as I turned the engine off. It was too quiet, too still. "You okay?" she asked, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Yeah," I said. "Just a bit out of the way, isn't it?" She smiled again. That same perfect smile. "Exactly." Before I could say anything else, she moved. 1 second she was in the passenger seat, The next, she was climbing over the center console, straddling me. Her knees pinned my hips, her hands pressed against my shoulders, pushing me back into the seat. My heart was hammering. This was happening. It was actually happening. But then she stopped. Completely. No movement, no words. Just still. At first I thought she was teasing, playing some kind of game. Then I noticed her head had turned slightly. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, out the driver's side window. Her expression had changed. It wasn't seductive anymore. It was expectant, like she was waiting. A cold feeling crept up my spine. "What are you?" That's when I saw them. 3 shapes emerging from the tree line. At first, just silhouettes. Too dark to make out clearly, but they were moving fast, purposefully. My stomach dropped. "Who are they?" I said, my voice suddenly tight. She didn't answer. She just started laughing. Not loud, not hysterical. Just a low, quiet laugh right in my face. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Before I could react, something slammed into the driver's side window. The glass exploded inward with a deafening crack, spraying shards across the dashboard and into my lap. I flinched, throwing an arm up instinctively. "Get out!" a voice roared from outside. Deep, angry, close. Everything happened at once after that. My brain snapped into something sharp and focused. The girl, Chloe, if that was even her name, was still on top of me. But her weight shifted slightly as she turned toward the shattered window. That was enough. I twisted my hips hard to the side and shoved upward. She wasn't expecting it. Her balance broke, and she fell sideways, half out of the open door, colliding with one of the figures rushing toward us. I didn't wait. I yanked the door open fully, the hinges screaming, and threw myself forward into the driver's seat properly. Keys, where were the keys? Still in the ignition, my hands were shaking as I turned them. The engine roared to life. Someone grabbed at the door. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, the open door swinging violently before slamming shut on its own. I heard shouting, swearing, heavy footsteps. Then a loud crack from behind me. The back window shattered, something punching through it and scattering glass across the back seat. I didn't look back. I just drove. Faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't stop until I hit a main road, headlights and streetlights flooding the car, making everything feel almost unreal. Only then did I slow down. Only then did I realize how hard I was shaking. My hands were covered in tiny cuts from the glass. My ears were ringing. My chest felt like it was going to cave in. I kept driving anyway, straight home. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I kept replaying it over and over in my head. The messages, the photos, the way she rushed everything, the location, the laugh. I still don't know exactly what their plan was. Rob me? Beat me? Something worse? Every possibility is worse than the last. And sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I think about what would have happened if I hadn't reacted fast enough. If I'd hesitated. If I'd stayed pinned under her for just a few seconds longer. If I'd believed just a little more that I was lucky. Because the truth is, nothing about that night was luck. And if something feels too good to be true, it probably is. I just got away. I don't think everyone does.